The funniest jokes that Melissa has had in my movies have been where she like starts to say it and she stops herself and says, "I can't say that." I was like, "Melissa, you better say it." And then she'll say it and it'll be hilarious. And you're like, "Oh my God, that was the greatest thing I've ever heard." But so I find that with the best comedy people is you just sometimes need to give them a little push.
There aren't many comedies that can be called groundbreaking, but Bridesmaids from 2011 is one of them. It showed that women on film could be just as raunchy as men, and that there's a huge audience for female-led comedies. Bridesmaids changed how audiences perceived Melissa McCarthy. It made her a movie star. She played the amusing and completely unfiltered sister of the groom. In this scene, the maid of honor, played by Kristen Wiig, is trying to plan a nice, proper bridal shower.
Okay, now that Lillian's in the bathroom, I just wanted to talk to you guys about the shower really quick. I was thinking it could be like French-themed, since she's always wanted to go to Paris her whole life.
That, and I'll just snowball on top of that, also Fight Club. Female Fight Club. We grease up, we pull in, Lillian doesn't know, so it's, surprise, we're gonna fight. We beat the shit out of her.
The film became a huge success. Melissa McCarthy got an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress. Kristen Wiig and Annie Mumolo were nominated for Best Original Screenplay. And the director, Paul Feig, became Hollywood's go-to guy for female-led comedies. His films The Heat, Spy, and A Simple Favor raked in hundreds of millions at the box office. But Paul Feig was no overnight success. By the time he made Bridesmaids, he'd been working in Hollywood for 25 years, most of that time as an actor. And no matter what he did in showbiz, he was extremely well dressed. Paul always wears a suit and tie to work. He even dressed up for our interview, which was on Zoom. My guest today is Paul Feig. I'm your host, Ben Mankiewicz, and this is Talking Pictures, a podcast about movies, about memories, and all the stuff that happens in between. Turner Classic Movies makes this podcast with the streaming service Max, where you can see some of the movies mentioned in this episode. Paul Feig's big break came in 1999, when he wrote a show based on his own life. Together with filmmaker Judd Apatow, Paul created Freaks and Geeks, a blend of teen comedy and angst. It aired on NBC. It was canceled after just one season, but thanks to DVD and cable, Freaks and Geeks has become a cult hit. Set in Detroit in the early 80s, the show follows suburban teens navigating the awkwardness of high school.
Hey, geek. You got a problem?
No. I was just looking at a friend of mine.
Are you telling me that I look like a friend of yours?
Hey, Ken. I think he likes you.
Is that true? Do you like me? In your dreams, geek.
The show featured Busy Phillips, Seth Rogen, James Franco, and Jason Segel before they became stars. After Freaks and Geeks, Paul Feig started directing quality TV shows like The Office, Weeds, and Arrested Development. How much did the doing Arrested Development and Weeds and The Office, these really high quality episode of 30 Rock and Parks and Rec and Mad Men, like how much did doing this sort of prestige television, even the comedies, inform you and get you made you a better director, that put you in a position to direct Bridesmaids, which is just all of a sudden you got a big hit and it's a big giant studio film?
No, I mean, it was the best film school ever. Even though when I was, I always wanted to direct movies, and I was learning so much and having so much fun directing television, but at the same time felt unsatisfied by it. But looking back now, I realize is I was just learning so much stuff, because especially going from The Office to Weeds to Nurse Jackie, because I think I got to play so much and try out so many things. And they were so wonderful.
So given the background you had, you said that these sitcoms, and again, these sitcoms are brilliant, Arrested Development in particular, but also yours, Freaks and Geeks, and you're working with really talented people, and I'm sure you're getting good reinforcement from the producers that these are shows they like and they're good. You know, you directed one of the most significant Office episodes, Steve Carell's final episode, but still, Bridesmaids, like this is different, and you were, I mean, you know. How sweaty were the palms when on day one of Bridesmaids, or did you feel like, no, man, I got this now. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I felt pretty good about it because it was I was allowed, you know, through Judd especially, who had kind of been doing it on with his movies, to have a loose, not I would say a looseness that is. But a lot of my movies get criticized by people who don't like my movies of saying, oh, they just show up at the Improv. We don't ever do that. You don't ever do that. You go in with a great script that you work really hard on, and you just have alternate jokes you want to try, and you let people like, oh, try this. So you surprise me with that. But, you know, we don't make stuff up. And I just knew I was more nervous going into it pre-production, because I knew we had to get the script right, and we were really hard on the script, and we were doing all this stuff. And then casting was really like, there were so many great people, and you're just like, how do I make sure I get the right group? So once we had the kind of the super group that came from just seeing everybody in town, mixing and matching people, you know, doing kind of chemistry reads with groups of 3 and seeing how they get along and all that stuff and how they play off each other. Once we had that, it was kind of like, oh, this is going to be fun. You know, you're always nervous going into a movie. I mean, the night before is always, you know, you can't imagine the movie existing, and you can't imagine being on the set. You can't imagine, you know, things happening. And then suddenly you're there and it's just one shot at a time and you're just knocking them off. So, no, I just really wanted to have fun on it. And, you know, there were times when the demands from the editing room were more alternate jokes, and I had to get used to that because I was doing a lot of extra stuff on the shows I was on, you know, like The Office really let you play in that world. But so I kind of came into like, okay, we can play a bit, but we're not going to go nuts. And then they were going like, we need more stuff. And so that was kind of a learning curve. But then as soon as I kind of got into it, it's like, this is really fun because now we're going to come up with even more stuff. And, you know, we had writers on the set. Annie Mumolo was always on the set writing jokes, and I'm coming up with stuff. And then obviously our cast is filled with great improvisers, so they're coming up with stuff. And it was the job I got used to having a lot of chaos, controlled chaos, I call it, which now I put on pretty much all my sets. Not so much like the Simple Favor movies and stuff like that, because those are thrillers and they're a little tighter, but at the same time we still play on those too, because I just refuse to go into the editing room without a bunch of extra stuff.
Let me double back on casting just for a second, if I could, because it's weird. Like, I feel like I know, and I don't know, but I presume because Kristen wrote Bridesmaids, right? Am I correct?
Kristen and Annie, Kristen and Annie.
So she's in it. Right? Like, there's no casting someone else. It's Kristen.
Right.
It's her movie. And therefore I thought she was like, she wrote Maya's part for Maya Rudolph in my head. This is what's happening in my head. So no, that you're telling me that's not true. Maya Rudolph had to get cast in that like a regular person.
Yeah. Well, what happened with that was, there was somebody else we wanted to go to, we thought, and then it just didn't work out. But we were also going like, well, we just want to have an immediate chemistry between these people. And it doesn't mean that if you cast somebody, those people won't have a chemistry, but it was just like, well, Maya and Kristen are best friends in real life. So, and Maya's great. So why would we not cast Maya in this role? And it just worked so well because it just allowed us to not have to put hardly any backstory in for them. You know, the first time you see them in that coffee shop, just talking and chatting, you go like, oh, I love them. Like, they've known each other forever. I don't need to hear, oh, Annie, I've known you for 25 years and you've always said, you know, that
Right.
kind of crap that you normally have to do. So no, but then, but we did cast kind of everybody. We weren't really Sure, because there were just so many people who were good, you know?
Did you know the actress who's become such a big part of your career? Did you know Melissa McCarthy well before this?
I had never seen Melissa McCarthy in my life. I never watched Gilmore Girls, which everybody knew her from, so she was kinda
Yeah.
popular from that. I'd never seen an episode of that, and for some reason, whenever I was casting something that would be great for her, she was working on something, so she wasn't available. So I never had laid eyes on the woman until she came in to the audition, and that was the part we were really struggling with because we kind of found everybody else, we thought, and it's just like, we can't find our Megan. Like we keep getting close, but nobody's right. And that was when Kristen and Annie, at the very end of the process, said, "Oh, you should see our friend Melissa. She's at the Groundlings, and people line up around the block when she's performing. She's so popular." I was like, "Oh, great! where has she been? Why haven't we seen her already?" And she just came in and blew us all away. And if you hear her tell the story, she thinks she came in and screwed it up and left feeling like she had blown the audition.
Actors are so fragile, and I mean that in a good way. I
Yeah.
love actors. That's not a knock. Like, I mean, they're just
No, it's true.
incredibly tough on themselves.
Yeah, especially when you're a comedy person, and we always had an improv portion of the of the audition, and she went off on these flights of fancy that we thought were so hilarious, but she thought she had gone too far.
Hey, not Air Marshal John, you want to get back in that restroom and not rest?
No, I have to get back to my seat.
Yeah, you got to get back on my seat. You get it?
No, I think, yeah, I definitely got it.
Uh-oh. What's that? You feel that steam heat coming? That's from my undercarriage.
Okay.
That can go up and higher.
Because in comedy, a lot of people, well, maybe not so much now, but comedy directors tend to be pretty controlling people. Especially if you go to like TV showrunners who write comedy are the most controlling people you'll ever meet in your life because they don't like actors changing the words or anything.
They're all Billy Wilder, right?
Yeah,
They're like, right.
Well, there's two things I keep in my office all the time. I'm looking at them both right now because I'm in my office. One is a model of the Titanic because I say no matter how great everything seems, it can all go down. And the other is a bust of Shakespeare to remind myself and all the writers I work with that we are not Shakespeare, so we can change this stuff. It's not set in stone.
No, that's great. I love that. That's a great little detail, Paul. So, I always feel weird asking questions like this because they seem like, such red carpet questions. But could you have imagined when you're casting Megan and you never met Melissa McCarthy and here she comes in for the audition that, your success as a filmmaker, which is undeniable, is tied to her, as is her success in movies tied to you?
No, you have no idea, but you pretty quickly go, "Oh, I'm in sync with this person," because senses of humor there's a million senses of humor. I mean, that's why it's so hard to kind of make people like a comedy or, even get a laugh when you're in a group and you tell a joke or something. Like some people will crack up, other people just look at you like you're crazy, so when you're trying to make comedy, that's the hardest part is like, who's in sync with me? Because sometimes you'll get somebody who's really funny, but they want to go way over the top. And you're like, "Oh, that's too much. Can you pull that back?" And they're like, well, it's going to be boring if I do that, or they'll underplay so much. You're like, "Oh my God, you go bigger." And they're like, "I'm not going to do that. It's going to be like a cartoon." You're like, "God damn it." So when you find somebody who has the exact same, what I call governor as you do, we will go right to that and then we won't go over it. And that's just like gold for you. And it's fun because we push each other. I mean, the funniest jokes that Melissa has had in my movies have been where she like starts to say it and she stops herself and says, "I can't say that." I was like, "Melissa, you better say it." And then she'll say it and it'll be hilarious. And you're like, "Oh my God, that was the greatest thing I've ever heard." But so I find that with the best comedy people is you just sometimes need to give them a little push to get to their governor. Sometimes they'll stop themselves 10% below their governor, and you got to push them up there. But Melissa and I were just always in sync. We always just loved stuff, and we also challenged each other in a way that made each of us go to our next level.
no pressure. You can't think of one. Is there an example you have of that where she like, I can't say it like that. I
Yeah,
can't do
yeah,
it. And then
yeah. It was in Spy. It was when Rose Byrne is holding the gun on her in the cockpit, and she goes and fuck you for saying I look anything like that beast. When she showed that picture of the mother, she was like, "No wonder you're an only child. You fuck a monster like that once, you just drop the mic and leave." It's something like that.
And fuck you for saying I look anything like that fucking beast. No wonder your father never had the son he wanted. You fucked that monster once, and you just dropped a fucking mic and walk out.
So you have a skill that was a compliment that was often given to my uncle, Joe Mankiewicz, that you're one of these male directors who has a particular facility in directing women. Do you think there is anything to that?
I mean, I'm proud of that, very much so. It's kind of what I've always wanted to do. I've just always loved funny women, and I love women in movies, like really complex, three-dimensional female characters I love. And there was such a long period where that stopped, and guys were the three-dimensional characters, and the women were just these kind of props to get in the way or to set them up or whatever. And so yes, I mean, I was a pretty feminized guy. I was an only child, very close with my mom. My next door neighbors were a family of 8, but all my best friends were the girls in the family. They were all my age. And in school, all my friends, other than my nerdy dude friends, were girls. And I was close with my female teachers and stuff. I think I had enough bullies that, like, male energy always kind of put me off. And so it's always just felt very natural to me. I really struggled in the point of my career, especially like coming out of Freaks and Geeks, where everybody was trying to get me to do teen movies. And the formula was always a bunch of guys trying to get laid, and it was just like, ugh, I have no interest in these stories whatsoever, because I didn't like guys like that growing up, and I didn't hang out with them, and I saw, how they broke the hearts of the girls that I liked and all this. And so I think it all just added up to there was nothing else I was ever going to really do. And that I relate to, I mean, to this day, if somebody, when people pitch us projects, I'm always like, can it be a woman? They pitch this guy, every pitch starts like, it's about this guy who, and I was like, well, can it be a woman?
Let me stop you right there.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that, because again, there's just so many amazingly talented women out there. And it's just nice to be able to give them characters that they relate to, and it's really fun to watch them watch those things. We are test screenings, like, it's really, I just love the response we get from female audiences. It's fun to get the response from the guys too, but I don't say I'm less concerned about that, but I'm much more in service of my female audience, because I like giving them stuff that they like, because there was such a dearth of it for so long. And I'm talking mostly comedy.
When you talk about that genre of, guys going after women in movies, and obviously there's a way to do that and a way to make that good, but
it can be funny.
Yeah, it can be funny, of course. But usually if the guys are being made fun of, right? I mean, if they're pathetic in their nature of doing it, not cruel, but, so the kind of comedy I hate most is a bunch of young guys talking about girls in crude ways.
Yeah.
And part because I just felt like it always put me in a difficult position of then sort of feel like I have incredibly close male friends. I am blessed with guys who I could talk to about serious things, mostly laugh with.
Yeah.
And of course we talk about women, but we never talk about sex like that ever. Yeah. It's too embarrassing. I would never think of talking about sex that way in front of my friends.
No, you know what? It's all kind of the bastard children of Animal House. Animal House is a brilliant movie. It's funny. It definitely gets into the kind of like, all right, guys trying to get laid thing. And there's, some actually aggressively scenes like that. But at the same time, it was kind of, I don't know, it was new and it was something we hadn't really seen before. But then the only takeaway from that was that,
Right. That's
so
right.
That's
They
why
missed
the comedies.
They missed the important parts of that movie.
Yeah, exactly. And so And it was always those scripts are always the same formula. It was always like an awkward, nerdy guy and his skirt chasing best friend.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know an awkward, nerdy guy in my life that had a skirt chasing best friend. You know, it was all like hiding out, like, oh my God, like, are you going to ask her out? I don't know. You're going to, I'm that kind of thing.
Let me go out on a limb and say that the awkward, nerdy guy's best friend is an awkward, nerdy guy.
Exactly. Usually more awkward and more nerdy.
We're going to take a quick break. Coming up, Paul recalls the riskiest move of his career and how it nearly cost him everything.
I'm just literally sitting there with like, oh my God, I think I just bankrupted the family. And then it turned out I kind of did.
Before Paul Feig became a filmmaker, he wanted to be a comedian. He performed stand-up for years, then transitioned to acting in TV shows. One of his biggest roles was in ABC's Sabrina, the Teenage Witch. He played Mr. Poole, the biology teacher.
Sorry I'm late, but my car broke down. Made the mistake of trying to go uphill in my AMC Gremlin.
Why don't you just get a better car, Mr. Poole?
Like a Ferrari? Sure. You know what? I'm gonna run right out after class and buy one. And I'll pay for it with frustration. Now can we move on to science? All right, today we're gonna talk about the elements and why one can't turn lead into gold, no matter how hard one tries.
Paul was a regular on season 1. There were 6 seasons to go, but not for Paul. The show let him go.
I wrapped season 1 so sure that I was coming back for 7 more seasons that I took all the money that I made that first season and put it into making this little independent film. And it was gone. I mean, so I was like, oh, good, I'll restock the coffers. And then in the middle of post, basically the exec producer, not the showrunner, but it was basically Melissa Joan Hart's mom, who was acting as a producer on it, called me up and said, like, oh, I got some good news and bad news. What's the bad news? Well, we're not bringing you back to the show. Then what could possibly be the good news? Oh, well, we want to bring you back for a couple of guest spots. It's like, well, that's not good news.
Yeah, there's no part of that conversation that's good news.
No, exactly. I'm just literally sitting there with like, oh my God, I think I just bankrupted the family. And then it turned out I kind of did, because then the movie that I made, that I took all the money and put into, I just couldn't sell it anywhere. So I couldn't get even any film festivals. So that was it.
Without whatever you're comfortable with, how much did that little endeavor cost you of making this movie and then losing your job?
$35,000.
Yeah. So that obviously had a significant impact on the direction of your life, right? I mean, that's as big a blow. You've lost parts before, but this is different.
Well, this is what I called the getting kicked out of the nest moment, but it took a year to kind of recover from it, because I had, I'd made that movie. And so I was posting that movie. And so then I didn't, I had just enough money to kind of finish it. And did it, but then it sent me on this year-long odyssey of trying to get it into film festivals, and I just couldn't get it into any film festival, none, because it was 97. It was kind of the year that a lot of people started making indie films on their own. Like, the year I had submitted to Sundance, I think they had 1,400 feature film submissions. It's like, okay, my movie about 4 people in a field waiting for a UFO to show up didn't make the grade. And so it was a really rough year, but I knew it had kicked me out of the nest, but it made me write the pilot for Freaks and Geeks. And then that obviously changed everything.
And did you formally, I don't realize you don't have to tender your resignation. Did you formally in your head quit being an actor?
Yeah, I did. I did, but you still kind of were hanging under the dream, because I didn't know, I couldn't sell this movie. I'm like, I don't know if I can be a director. Like, is anybody going to hire me or whatever? So, but the big break moment I had was, meaning break with acting, was I got called in because John Landis was going to do Honey, I Shrunk the Kids as a TV series. And Landis was, Blues Brothers, Animal House were touchstones for me. So it's just like, oh my God, I'm going to meet this guy. And so I go in and he's like, hey, so I see you just directed a movie. I'm like, oh yeah. And so we had this like 15-minute talk of like director to director and talking about all this stuff. And I was just like in heaven, like, oh my God, when these comedy geniuses talking to me about this. And then he goes like, okay, so you're going to read for us now. And there's something about that drop in status was so devastating to me that, first of all, I just completely tanked the audition. I mean, he must have been like, I thought I was out of my mind. I forgot all the lines, and I was like, had my face in the script, and I just walked out there going, like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, you realize, no, this interests me. This is way more interesting than this.
Yeah, 100%. But like everybody tried to talk me out of it for some reason. I think they just would like, okay, you're just like this kind of character actor, funny guy. But they didn't see, and in their defense, I think I always came off very kind of, I'm just out here to make everybody laugh. Like I didn't give off any vibe that I could be in charge of a set. Let's just say.
Did you think you could be?
I wasn't sure, to be quite honest. I had two things that happened in my life, and one was when I was in film school at USC. There's these the senior project's called a 480, and that's the big thing. And like you write these scripts, and then the whole school votes on who gets to make them, and then you get 2 people or 4 people get to make their big thing, and the rest of us work as crew on it. Well, I wrote it like this bowling musical that I thought was hilarious and very excited about, and of course they didn't let me do it. So I went and shot somebody else's thing as a cameraman, but then a friend of mine had gotten his senior project approved, and he couldn't do it. He had to, something happened in his family. He had to go away. And he said, I want you to direct this because I know you get it and all this. But it was about these 2 young women. One has a terminal illness. It was real melodramatic. So I was like, I don't know if I can do that. But also I was just like, if I'm in charge of a set, that means I have to yell at people and I might have to fire somebody. And all I could see was not fulfilling a creative vision. All I could see was the managerial side of it, and had reading stories about directors are yelling and all the time. And I worked myself into such a tizzy about it. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And instead of just going to the film school and saying, I can't do this, have somebody else do it, I decided to rewrite the script to make it a pro-suicide movie.
Sure.
Which then when I saw Thelma and Louise, somehow that's the ending I wrote, which was these 2 girls are standing on this cliff, and the last thing was like, they go, look how beautiful it is. She goes, well, just a bunch of trees, and they jump off and kill themselves. And of course the dean was like, we can't make this. And I was like, well, okay, I guess I can't do it, and walked out of there just like, oh, phew, just like I don't have to do this, and was completely relieved. But then thought like, well, how am I ever going to fulfill my dream of directing movies if I can't do this? And so flash forward to, I make the one that I bankrupted the family with coming out of Sabrina. And it's a 6-day shoot, but it's a 80-minute feature film, but I had it all boarded out, and it takes place in one field. So first day goes great, really good. Second day, I fall behind immediately. And my AD is a friend of mine who's a really experienced guy who's a pretty famous writer now. And he was another person who didn't think I could do it. And so when I got so behind, he was like, man, you're never going to make this day, blah, 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 and putting all this pressure on me. And I remember going like, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown, like literally going like, I'm going to have a meltdown, and thought, and I had the wherewithal to go like, give me a minute. And I just walked into this field away from the cast and the crew and everything. And I'm just standing there, and I go, if you could fold the movie. Let's just fold it. It's my money. Who cares? And I remember saying, if I fold this and if I cave in now, I'm never going to make a movie again as long as I live. My career is over. I'm never going to be able to do it. So either man up or get out. And that's just like, I want to do this. So I walked back and said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We had this big 4-page scene with all this coverage. I said, I'm going to do it as a oneer. And got the 4 of us. I was in it too. And so like all this exposition, and we start here, and we all walked over as a group. We came over here and we did it as a oneer. And I go, it's great. We're back on schedule. Told you I could do it. And that was it. And that was the moment. I've never looked back, and I've never kind of had that breakdown moment again.
So and again, what every director from a kid just out of film school to Steven Spielberg has done. Like, well, this is we have to make changes right now on the fly. Like sometimes you create out of these broken moments, like some wonderful piece of your film.
Yeah, like I used to really over prepare. I would do shot lists, I would do storyboards because when I was in film school, you'd hear about how Hitchcock did it, and he just storyboarded everything. So and he wouldn't shoot anything that he wasn't going to use, so that the studio couldn't change the cut. That sounded so great to me. But so I would go to these first in TV, and then when the early movies I made, so inflexible that like if an actor had an idea, I'm like, no, you can't because this shot's here and then I have to get to this shot and all that. And it was terrible. And it was really the great Joan Plowright who got me out of that because she yelled at me one day because I'm working with this legend and she wants to do we're rehearsing. She wants to walk over here and she wants to go over here. And I'm just like, I don't have time to do all that. That's out of my shot list. And finally I go like, well, maybe Joan, maybe you just kind of sit here like we had planned. She goes like, well, if this is going to be a rehearsal where you want the input of professional actors, and fine. If you just want me to sit there and say whatever you do, whatever you want, then just tell me that. And I was like, oh no, God, no, Joan, I want to do whatever you want to do. But it showed me that no, she was right. And there were some things she wanted to do that were too far, but we came to this detente of like, okay, at this one point you'll walk over here. And it just made me realize you got to be flexible, especially in comedy.
So when did you start meaningfully watching movies, or when did movies start having an impact on you?
The first two moments that blew my mind in moviedom were they released Animal Crackers, the Marx Brothers movie Animal Crackers, into theaters when I was like 9 years old, into big theaters. And my mom was like, "Oh, you love comedy. Let's go see this." Who are the Marx Brothers? So we went in. It was a matinee, and the place was packed with college students. I think they're all high out of their minds, But me, I was like, "Oh, it's good." Yeah. And this movie comes on, and people are laughing and going crazy, and I'm just like, "What is happening?" And I couldn't believe that something that was that old was still so relevant and so funny, and it was so anarchistic and crazy. So that blew my mind. And then it was What's Up, Doc is the movie that really cracked my head open.
but you got Animal Crackers. Like you thought you weren't puzzled by why people were so funny.
No,
like why you weren't puzzled by why people were laughing. Like you were into it.
Exactly. Yeah. But here's the thing. When I would watch movies back then, I wasn't necessarily going, oh my God, I want to make movies. I was like, I want to be Groucho Marx,
Right.
So that was my takeaway. And then when I watched What's Up, Doc, it wasn't like, oh, this is based on screwball comedies. I want to be a director. It's like, oh my God, I'm in love with Barbara Streisand, but oh, that car chase is so much fun. I want to be in a car chase like that, So it was bits and pieces of kind of, I didn't know what movies were. It sounds crazy, but I didn't.
I get you. That makes sense. And then, so before we get to What's Up, Doc, so you would have, but like the Marx Brothers like continued to influence you through until like today, right?
Yeah, 100%. That kind of anarchy, but with extreme characters. What I love about the Marx Brothers is, the story was so superfluous. I mean, it was, only Zeppo was kind of taking it seriously, and everybody else was such anarchy.
Honorable Charles H. Hungadunga, care of Hungadunga, 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 and McCormick. Semicolon. How do you spell semicolon? All right, make it a comma.
But even the way you dress, right? I mean, it feels like the Marx Brothers, like they permeate the entirety of Paul Feig's life. And so,
oh, totally. Yeah. Well, to me, funny people dressed nice is the key to comedy. I mean, like, and when these talk show hosts now start wearing no tie, I'm just like, you have to be wearing a tie. If you're doing a monologue, I don't want to watch my talk show host with an open neck collar because there's a formula for it. I've always said a million times, the Ministry of Silly Walks sketch from Monty Python would not be funny if he was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. It's funny right. Because in a full suit, tie, bowler hat, and I just love that. I think there's something, again, back to the anarchy of comedy. If somebody looks like they're straight and narrow and just tied up, and yet there can be wacky, then you're like, wow, that's cool. And then that's the kind of anarchy, like when you're a kid, you're like, that's an adult who looks like my principal, dressed like my principal, but look at, he's nuts, or he's so funny. and he's just doing things that you're not supposed to do. That I never got over that, and I think that's to this day why I probably dress like this. And
So you didn't dress up because you knew you were going to be on a Zoom call with the TCM host. You just this is Wednesday wear.
Yeah, it's just every day in the editing room when I'm on the set. I mean, I always am in a suit and tie or jacket and tie on the set, in post and prep, everything. My father, when he owned his store, ran his store. He always had a sports jacket and tie every single day when he'd be back in the warehouse and all that. So to me, it's just like, if you're an adult male and you're in charge, you got to put on a suit and tie.
So how old are you in 1972?
72, I was 10.
So 10 years old, and you saw What's Up, Doc at a theater?
Yeah. Did the Americana Theater in Dearborn, Michigan, which was the big movie house. That's where, like, the first time I saw Star Wars, that was the movie palace. Gigantic.
You had to leave. You had to get out of Mount Clemens.
Yeah.
And there was like a theater there, but that was like second run movies. You had to, right.
Yeah. And they just were smaller theaters. These were like movie palace, as a movie palace. And I went to see What's Up, Doc. I don't remember why I saw it, other than my mom knew I liked comedy, and she liked Ryan O'Neal. So I think she took me to see it. And I was just like, it blew my mind because it was so funny, but then it had that car chase in it, which, I was way into cars. I wanted to be a race car driver at one point when I was a kid. And I was really into anything with, like, demolition derbies and cars smashing into other things, typical dude at that age. But the fact that I was like, I'm watching a hilarious car chase with all these gags, I just couldn't get over it. But everything is funny. The courtroom scene is so funny.
You have a wife and a fiance?
No, sir. But she kept calling me Steve.
Your own fiance calls you Steve?
No, sir, my wife. Or rather, the one who isn't my wife.
Well, what does the one who isn't your fiance call you? Howard?
No, sir, the one who isn't my fiance doesn't call me Howard, and the one who isn't my wife doesn't call me Howard. Because the one who isn't my fiance is also the one who isn't my wife. The other one who isn't my wife, the one who is my fiance, she doesn't call me Steve. She calls me Howard. Do you see?
I did a screening of it a few years back at the Austin Film Festival. They had me curate this thing. It played through the roof with this young audience. So that's how you go, like, that's timeless comedy. It's all based on characters, but it's physical comedy. I just did a movie called Jackpot, which I wanted to put a lot of physical comedy into because that transcends international, borders and all this. It's what my friend Jim Giannopoulos, who ran Paramount and Fox, would call the Dusseldorf test. He'd say, like, if they laugh at it in Dusseldorf, if a guy slips on a banana peel and falls down, like, that's meaningful because it plays all over the world. And so I'm always trying to crack the Dusseldorf test.
That's the Dusseldorf funny by itself.
Exactly.
Dusseldorf.
You just
right?
have to say it.
Yeah, just have to say it. So you got a movie streaming now, a Jackpot, with a couple of people who, didn't come up as actors and are totally engaging to watch, right?
Yeah.
Awkwafina and John Cena.
Yeah, they are great. No, yeah, it's fun. I mean, I just wanted to make a big, crazy kind of Jackie Chan-ish kind of comedy, and this script came in with a insane premise about a lottery in the near future where if you win, everybody with a losing ticket has until sundown to legally kill you and take your prize. And to me, it was just a jumping off point to just have insane action, because I love action comedy. Having done Spy, and we had a bit of it in The Heat, but mostly in Spy and in Ghostbusters too. And I just find it kind of bodies in motion, kind of funny in a way that Laurel and Hardy and Three Stooges and all that kind of thing. And then Jackie Chan, like I said, was. So it was just the excuse to do that, and I'm very proud of it. And it's streaming on Amazon now. You can watch it. It's been #1 for 4 weeks in a row as of our talking.
What is going on?
Katie, you won the lottery. And now anyone with a losing ticket that kills you before sundown gets her money. Legally.
Okay, that's murder.
Oh, not in California. It's just a chance at the big time.
So two quick follow-ups on Jackpot then. One, did you see the Purge movies?
Oh yeah.
So I'm into the Purge movies.
Yeah.
I think it's a great premise. And this is
really fun.
When I was reading about Jackpot, I thought, well, this is a little like this is borrowing a little part of the Purge.
Yeah, I always say it's the Purge meets a Mad World, basically.
Well, that's a good. You left out two Mads, but
I don't want to take up your audience's time.
As you say, you want to make a big spectacle action comedy. Is knowing that it's mostly going to be streamed make any difference in your approach
No,
to that?
no, you shoot it the same way. I mean, when you're making a movie for streaming, you're always going like, well, maybe they'll release it theatrically. It's always your hope. And then it doesn't happen because it doesn't fit their financials. But no, you honestly, you do not make a movie any differently for streaming. I kind of get mad when people say like, oh, streaming movies are different. They're not. You shoot a movie the way you shoot a movie. The only thing you might do different, and I do this in my movies, my theatrical movies too, is if there's an insert of like text on a phone, I make sure it's gigantic because I know a lot of people are going to end up watching the movie on their phone. So, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, reading a text in a movie now, and also now that there's also in these shows that where people are always looking at their phones and text, they give you an eighth of a second to read it. Like, come on, man. Come on. Yeah.
One of the greatest reading shots ever in a movie is in a Three Stooges short where they're like, they're trying to, there's like a dictator and they're going to infiltrate some country, but they put up a picture of a map. And I think that map is up there for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just got all these funny countries on it. And you're just sitting there like, I guess I'm supposed to read all these right now.
Yeah, I like that. That's how it ought to be. We're taking another quick break. When we come back, we'll have our Super 8, where Paul discusses his favorite comedy. And we're back. Time for our Super 8, where we ask our guests a series of set questions about movies they've watched, loved, and will always remember. All right, so we're going to do the Super 8. All right, so obviously, Paul, growing up, movies very important to you. But from the moment you saw your first film until, let's say, last night, what has been your most memorable movie watching experience?
I think the most memorable one, I've had a few that really formed me when I was young, but I think the one that really transformed me was when I saw the opening morning, first screening ever of Raiders of the Lost Ark at the Chinese theater. Knew nothing about it. Literally, it was just some friends. I was a tour guide at Universal at the time, and they were like, "Oh, there's this new movie coming out by Spielberg, Raiders of the Lost Ark." What's that? Oh, we don't know. Okay, pre-internet, so you didn't get bombarded with a million different things, and I just was so rocked, not only by the movie itself, which was just such a joyride and so much fun, but the audience response. People went crazy. When that boulder came rolling down the first time, now we've seen it a million times, nobody knew that was coming. And people leapt out of their seat and they were screaming. And I was just like, wow, this is what movies can do. And then it was just so great. And then, you thought it was over. And then you had the big ending where suddenly all these, spirits come out and melt Nazis and all that. And it was absolutely transformative. I've had other experiences like that before, but that was the one that also made me realize what a filmmaker does.
All right. So what movie did you love in high school?
In high school, it was really, I just loved comedies, So honestly, Blues Brothers just completely was my jam. But I went and saw that movie over and over again because it was so much fun. I was really into like cars and demolition derbies and destruction and all that kind of thing as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old boy would be. And just that car chase at the end, I couldn't believe that, it's kind of what got Landis in trouble later in his career, just that excess, obviously. But he was doing that kind of thing, with Animal House, it was kind of comedic excess. But then, American Werewolf in London I loved that movie too. I was already out of high school by that point, but I was a tour guide at Universal Studios, and they showed it.
I remember every second of watching American Werewolf in London, and just and the terror and thrill that you felt throughout.
There's that double dream sequence that's so weird and disturbing, and and then the whole it's so over the top. That ending, and the werewolf is going through Piccadilly Circus, and people are crashing through the windshields and stuff. You're just like, oh my god! But there is something kind of I guess I think I'm a maximalist, and so I really have such a love of filmmakers who just go for it and just go way over the top. There's just a movie that came out recently called Polite Society. About this young Indian woman who wants to be a stunt woman, and the movie gets so crazy, and I just go like, it even in a ways that almost there's parts just don't work. They're so crazy, but I'm like, I just tip my hat to that, because I'd rather somebody just go really far and take a chance, than I think everything has to play it so safe these days, and we're trying to get awards and I've really fallen in love with horror movies and genre movies just because I go like, they're just going for it.
Is there a movie now that you'd show to a date or somebody you were interested in? Like a movie
to make sure that they're okay. I mean, we have the same sense of humor.
No, but by the way, that's what Steven Soderbergh totally has taken that question as like, there's some just deal breakers. Like I show them some of the stuff. I'm like, if you don't like it, I don't know how we can go on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. I think the weird test for me would be Napoleon Dynamite. Just because some people, that's a real dividing line movie I've found over the years. I think it's one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. That's how I know my wife. I love my wife. I remember she saw it first for some reasons. I think she went with a friend, and she goes, "I just saw your favorite movie."
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so I went, I was just like, and somebody throws that down, and you're like, all right, let me see this thing. And within 5 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, you're right.
Napoleon, give me some of your tots.
No, go find your own.
Come on, give me some of your tots.
No, I'm freaking starved. I didn't get to eat anything today. Oh, God. Gross. Freaking idiot.
That is nice to be that seen, by the person in your life. But
yeah. But then my wife and I also bonded over, she loved the Three Stooges. So, where are you going to find, a wife like that?
That's pretty good. All right. So in this scenario, you're a criminal. There's a vast warehouse that includes the props from every single movie. A vast warehouse that includes the props from every single movie. And you're a thief. What do you steal?
Ooh, an X-wing fighter from the original Star Wars.
Right. You're a maximalist. You don't take
exactly.
Right.
And
you
a
don't
nerd.
That's right. You don't take the letters of transit from Casablanca. You take an airplane.
I know exactly. Or Dan Aykroyd's cop car from Blues Brothers, just to drive that around.
What was your mother's favorite movie?
My mom's favorite movie. It's so funny because she never really pinpointed one. She just liked those old movies, and I think the one we had the most fun watching together was His Girl Friday, which they showed on the afternoon movie back in Detroit. And she just really, we both, I mean, that movie just was really formative for me too, just in fashion alone. I mean,
as soon as you said it, my next question was going to be, do you sort of, when you dressed, are you thinking about Cary Grant? You're you're sartorially gifted, and there's a Cary Grantness to your style.
Yeah, no, to me, what I fell in love with is double-breasted suits from that movie, because he always had, and the way he uses it, just like he's always like using like a power play of buttoning it up and taking it up, So that I fell in love with that from that, and then other sartorial movies for me were, everything else he was in, but Fred Astaire. And I mean, it's so cliched if you're into men's fashion that you go like Cary Grant, Fred Astaire. But it was true, because although, who was my biggest influence was William Powell, who I think is the most underrated of all the Hollywood stars.
He was great. No
so
question.
Funny.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Cool.
Funny, and could be dramatic, and, and had that, there was just that sense of danger to him when necessary.
Yeah.
Even though he was so, he was such a great, he always, Nick Charles, such a appealing character, but even there, like he had this little tiny threat to him. And then
Yeah, he could get tough all of a sudden. He'd be like light, and then he's like, oh man, he's a real detective. He's
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And then in the Kay Francis films before that, I'm a big William Powell fan too. All right, father's favorite movie.
Oh, my dad. My dad didn't like movies. He was weird about movies. I honestly I cannot tell you what my father's favorite movie was because I don't know. I thought it was going to be Cabaret when he packed us all in the car to go see Cabaret, and then he stormed out. He stormed us out of the theater about 20 minutes in because he was so put off by how sexualized it was and over the top. It wasn't even because it was sexualized. He lost his mind when they ran under this bridge and they screamed because a train goes overhead. He's like, oh, for God's sake. And he just didn't like anything that was out of control. He was a funny guy. He was a great dad, but he had no patience for anything. And so I don't honestly think I ever saw him watch a movie. I tell you, the movie that I saw him was 10 of Your Show of Shows. Do you remember that? They put out 10. 10 sketches from Your Show of Shows in movie theaters. And he trundled us down to go see that. And that he was howling with laughter. So I would have to say that's probably his favorite movie.
What movie makes you cry without fail?
Well, It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, I'm such a sap. That really, it's my favorite movie of all time just because even though, look, is it the greatest movie ever? No, of course not. But it does everything that I, as a filmmaker, feel a movie should do. It makes you laugh, it makes you cry, it makes you emotional, it gets you invested, you care so much, and you're so happy at the end, and you cry because you're happy, and that just, I don't know, I'll take that over some, cool movie that wins all the Academy Awards, but that I'm like, yes, it's very good. I really want to be affected by stuff. And so I don't cry at sad movies. I just feel kind of manipulated by them, unless it's just, you really kind of tap into something. I generally cry when I get overwhelmed.
Yeah,
and there's weird moments. I'll tell you, I don't know why this makes me start crying every time I see it. This is going to sound completely weird. In Poltergeist, when the house is going crazy and the daughter pulls up and she runs up, she goes what's happening? She screams, what's happening? Even saying it now, and I don't know why. I think it's just somehow human emotion at an 11 it gets me. I get goosebumps from it. And in my movies, I'm always trying to find where's that moment we can do that,
All right, so last one of the Super 8. Is there a movie that makes you laugh without fail? It sounds like many is the answer to that.
Yeah, gosh, I know. I'm such a sucker for stuff. I mean, I got to go back to Napoleon Dynamite. That just really... I gut laugh at that because even though I love doing R-rated comedy, it's my favorite thing to do. There's nothing funnier to me than if you can do the cleanest movie of all time. And that's why it's so funny, because they are so aggressively not swearing, and everything's just all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It really makes me laugh.
Paul Feig, thank you very much for all your time and for the movies. And I look forward to seeing you around town, maybe having a cup of coffee together.
Definitely. Thanks, pal.
I'm now in the mood for a Marx Brothers movie. Animal Crackers, good place to start. And it's been too long since I've seen either What's Up, Doc or The Blues Brothers, both of which have scenes that stand out in the rich history of movie car chases. That's our show. Thanks for listening. You can find many of the movies we talked about on the streaming service Max. We made a list for you. It's in our show notes. James Kim produces and edits Talking Pictures. The show is booked by Noea Murphy, Susan Bisak, and Missy Burns-Halpern. Glenn Matullo mixes each episode. Production support from Phil Richards, Yaakov Friedman, Liz Winter, Nicole Hill, and Cameron Kell. Angela Carone is our executive producer. Special thanks to Michael Gluckstad, Allison Cohen, and Kenya Reyes from the Max Podcast team. I'm Ben Mankiewicz. See you next time.